Asteroid flying through space, Chief Justice David Maraga has jolted the political landscape with daring advice to the president to dissolve the Houses of Parliament. Maraga read straight out of the Constitution of Kenya 2010, specifically Article 261, Section 7, an article that drafters probably meant to play the same role as a scarecrow would play in a farm or on a farm. An article not this House of Parliament and not this State House ever expected would be invoked. Both the article and Maraga's advice have thrown Kenya's political class into a spin, with a debate arising on a wide range of issues that include the meaning of the word shall and their practicality of forcing the country into a mid-term election. And this is a raging debate that we want to get into right now here on Newsnight. And it's a raging debate that's also affected the legal fraternity. Let me show you two tweets by two legal minds with very different opinions on one issue. Let's put that up. Okay, Martha Karua, Na Kenya party leader, says there are no ifs or buts. The president must dissolve parliament or cement his legacy as the president who subverted the constitution. Okay, the opinion of one legal mind. Let's get that of another. Ahmed Nasir Abdullahi, also known as the Grand Mullah, he says in a series of tweets, I'm only going to read one. In Article 261, subsection 7, does the verb shall mean the president? He then goes on to make a little joke about it's a mistake that can only be made by a first-year law student, etc., and mentions his friend there, Donald Kipkorir. But he goes on to say, in this constitutional context, the verb shall means may. So the president has absolute discretion to ignore, shelve, or take some time before he decides what to do. And this is where I want to bring in, because I hope they can give me some clarity, Honorable Gladys Boss, who is the woman rep Uasin Gishu, Jennifer Shamala, nominated rep as well in MP, both of them legal minds, and I'm hoping they'll give us some clarity, because I'll tell you the truth, legislators, this is a confusing night for Kenyans, and we hope that you'll be able to bring some clarity to the discussion, bearing in mind we're looking at the same law in the same country with the same constitution. You've heard me reading those two tweets. Who's right? Who's wrong? Honorable Shamala, let's start with you.
Thank you, Wariga. You said that the Honorable Chief Justice was like an asteroid flying through space. Actually, this morning, a friend of mine posed the question, could he be posturing for a legacy? Having stated that, we cannot just confine ourselves to the legalese of shall and may. We must discuss, because constitution making is a political process. And ultimately, the people who even make the law are actually the representatives of the sovereign. And the sovereign in this aspect and with this regard are the people of the Republic of Kenya. So we ask ourselves a very pertinent question, and I'm going to keep on posing that question. Why is it now? Why at this time, when we've been aware of this entire situation since 2015? I stand and I believe totally that there must be some form of gender parity in this country. I am a beneficiary of this gender parity. I was nominated because the nomination list insisted that it must be, the law states it is a zebra list. You have a disability, you have a man, you have women, and etc., etc. Having said that, we also understand that you must take into consideration the society in which we're living in. We have two women who have stood to be president of the Republic of Kenya. We have Charity Ngilu, who was the trailblazer. We have Martha Karua. These have been incremental steps. Today, as we speak, we have 22% of parliament. It consists of women representation, including the 47 women representatives. In view of this, I continue to ask myself, and against the backdrop that we are talking about a referendum and a discourse about constitutional amendments, why is it that within a couple of weeks of the resignation of the Chief Justice, when having been aware of the situation, he makes this decision and asks the president to dissolve parliament? These are the pertinent questions I think as Kenyans we must ask ourselves.
Honorable Shamala.
This is, we're not in an era, we cannot take this lightly. This parliament is the parliament that, if we are in an emergency crisis as we speak now, we are at war with corona as we speak now, we have been at war with Corona for almost 6 months as we speak now. In the event, for whatever reason, and we don't wish it upon our country, should that we need to declare war, the president needs to seek the approval of Parliament. And I'm not suggesting that we're even going to go that way, but why would you want a lacuna like this in a country, and we're going through what we have gone? We have gone through 2 presidential elections. One was nullified on the grounds that procedures were not followed. In the second petition, which had the same grounds and the same facts, after the second election, the election was upheld. I'm totally perplexed. And when I say I'm trying to wrap myself around the thinking of the Honorable Chief Justice, I truly am trying to understand what informed this decision or these
Honorable
actions.
Shamala, let me interrupt you because I need to bring in Honorable Boss as well. But let me ask you this. Is an error not an error if time has passed since it was first committed? Because that seemed to be the beginning of your argument today. Whether in 2015 or in 2020, if Parliament is not properly constituted, if elective and appointive bodies are not properly constituted, is that not an error that should be addressed, even if some would say better late than never?
I would not want to. I have just stated to you that we must look at things in a political context, in a social context as well. And I don't want to look at things and narrow it down through the narrow lens of, is it an error, is it not an error? The question is, why is it? Gladys Boss, the Honorable Gladys Boss, and she can speak to it on her bill on ensuring that we can reach this this threshold of not more than 2/3 being of the same gender. We must address more pertinent issues. Yes, if there is an error, not an error, errors are errors. But is constitutional making and amendments, are those considered errors? A continuous process of dialogue and a country speaking and asking pertinent questions, are those errors?
Well, I'm the one asking the questions, but you've posed an interesting question there, Honorable Boss.
Yes, I know. I'm just posing because we're also talking to the people of Kenya, Wariga.
That's right. Let me bring in Honorable Boss as well and ask you this. You heard me reading those tweets a bit earlier on. Who's right? Who's wrong? That's the question Kenyans are asking tonight, Honorable Boss.
I agree with the Honorable Martha Karua, but Waiga, let me put this in context. The 5th schedule of our Constitution lists down 48 pieces of legislation that must be enacted in order to give life to our Constitution. And the lawmakers gave between 1 to 6 years, within which time frame those laws needed to be enacted. And let me explain which laws we mean. One is on freedom of the media. The other is on the vetting of judges. The other one was the establishment of the National Police Service. The other one was on the National Land Commission. The other one was on the National Commission for Implementation of the Constitution. The other one was on devolution. The other one was on county governments. So let me ask, suppose, and in that same Article 261, says if any of those pieces of legislation are not enacted by Parliament within the time frame set in the 5th schedule, then Parliament shall be dissolved. So we are not, let's forget talking about the 2/3 legislation. Because suppose we hadn't had the law on the National Intelligence Service. Suppose we hadn't had the law on the National Police Service. Suppose we hadn't had the law on the National Land Commission. Suppose we hadn't had the law on the freedom of the media. Suppose we hadn't had the law on the system of our courts. Where would this country be? So we are just isolating. Are we saying that there are some laws that are lesser than others and others are superior to others? No. The Constitution is the Constitution. All of us, Honorable Shamala included, it took an oath of office and swore to uphold the Constitution. So if there was a choice that she didn't believe in certain parts of the Constitution being implemented, then she shouldn't have taken the oath of office at all. The president likewise took an oath of office. So we are saying that the only other way, if we don't agree with what is in the Constitution, is for us to be able to amend the law. And I would like a situation where right now we are in a crisis. I agree with Honorable Shamala that we are dealing with COVID, we've got a social and economic context that we must look at things in. So therefore, we must quit the blame game and begin to try and find a solution. If we don't look at it strictly, then Parliament is not dissolved at the moment until the President proclaims it. So even though the law doesn't give the President a timeline, then the President can use this leeway or this loophole to ensure or to persuade Parliament to enact the legislation. Now, in fact, pending in the Senate at the moment is a law that is called a Representation of Special Interest Groups Amendment Bill. What could happen is that they can make sure that they can tweak that a bit, make some more amendments, and it can go right through the process in Parliament, and the law can stand amendment. And once the law has been enacted, Parliament can even ask for reprieve that it can be, and this I'm thinking on the top of my head, the commencement date can be 2022. Then at least at that time, the Attorney General will have a leg to stand on. When he goes to court, he can tell the court that we have enacted the legislation, you know, it's going to, the commencement date is this year or this time at the time of the elections. Then that way you're resolving the problem through and this is not a legal way, but it's an administrative or political way that you can deal with the problem. And I would like Kenyans to be having that conversation of what to do. But the option that the President can contravene the Constitution is an option not available to him, because the same Constitution in Article 145 says that you can move a motion, any member can move a motion upon getting 1/3 signatures for impeachment of the President for gross violation of the Constitution or any law. So you can see that
okay, you seem to have stopped there, but you...
May I finish, please?
Yes, I hadn't actually said anything. Please finish briefly, please. Go ahead.
Could she allow me to finish? Could she?
Yes, she's not speaking. Please go ahead, Honorable Boss.
Honorable Shamala, kindly allow me to finish. What I said is that I am thinking like a pragmatic lawyer. The legal position is that the President has no choice but dissolve Parliament unless he wants to actually be in gross violation of the Constitution, that he held the Bible in Kasarani before millions of Kenyans and said that he will protect, uphold, and defend the Constitution of Kenya. The Constitution doesn't give him a choice. And Wahiga, Kenyans need to remember where we came from. We came from a time where when someone was appointed as a minister, no matter what wrongs they did or if they violated the law, no one could do anything to them. Today, Parliament has the power to impeach them. Even and you can set up a tribunal, move the setting of a tribunal against the DPP or the Attorney General or a judge. This is a good place that Kenya wanted to be, to ensure that those servants who are appointed or elected to be able to work for Kenyans, that Kenyans have a recourse if those servants failed them. Similarly, there is a recall clause for members of Parliament. Today, if the people of Uasin Gishu believe that I have failed, they will move to court, they will ask to recall me, and they will be able, and in that time, I will not be able to say, actually, I'm disobeying the Constitution because it will be too expensive for Uasin Gishu to have a by-election. No, I have no choice. That is what the Constitution says, and here I am speaking not as a legislator, but as an officer of the court. I took an oath of office to defend the Constitution, even as an advocate of the High Court of Kenya.
Honourable Boss, I'm going to interrupt you there. And there's an interesting point that you raised, that oath that the President took back in late 2017, an oath that you've also asked Challenger Honourable Shamala to speak on, because that oath is what ties you to obey the Constitution. And let's refresh the minds of our viewers. Let's take them back to late 2017 and briefly recap what the President said as he was sworn in for his second term and why he has quite a decision to make in this time.
That I will obey, preserve,
protect and defend the Constitution of Kenya,
protect and defend this Constitution of Kenya
as by law established,
and all other laws of the Republic, and all other laws of the Republic,
and that I will protect and uphold
and that I will protect and uphold
the sovereignty,
integrity,
and the dignity of the people of Kenya.
and dignity of the people of Kenya.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Taking you back to late 2017, and of course, let me take you now to Honorable Shamala, who also took an oath to carry out her duties, of course, as a nominated member of parliament and obey the constitution. And Honorable Shamala, Honorable Boss actually spoke about and questioned.
And also as an advocate of the High Court.
Yes,
and also
exactly.
an advocate
and
of the
I
High
want
Court.
to speak to that. Thank you very much.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Wahiga, I'm an advocate of the High Court of Kenya. The process is still not completed on this issue in the courts. As we speak, there is a court case, as we speak, in which Parliamentary Service Commission, I think, submitted their submissions on the 20th of August regarding an issue of which parliament was to have enacted these laws. Was it the 11th or the 12th parliament? Now that is an issue that is live in the courts. It has not yet been decided upon. Hence, again, I pose the question. Before an issue has been decided upon, why was it that the Honorable Chief Justice sent and actually stated that Parliament had acted carelessly and in a lazy, or words to that effect, manner? Yet there are matters still pending before these courts on the question of which parliament, seeking directions and clarity on which, was it the 11th parliament or is it the 12th parliament
Honorable Shamala,
that should have enacted this particular legislation?
how long would you have wanted the Chief Justice to wait before making such a move, since it seems you...
My question is that there is a matter that is live before the court. That is number one. My second question is, why is it that the Chief Justice is retiring on the 12th of January 2021?
That's right.
I am a member of the Justice and Legal Affairs Committee. Less than 10 days ago, we had a meeting with the Chief Justice. And actually, we had a meeting in camera and we asked the media to leave. We brought up very pertinent issues. Some of those issues being the fact of why the 14 judges the president has not named the 14 judges.
The 41.
And the adverse national security intelligence reports on some of those judges. I think it would have been courteous of the Chief Justice, as the committee that appropriates and defends the funding of the judiciary, to have at least informed us, where we've always had a working rapport and an excellent working rapport, to let us know that this was what he intended to do. Why was that not done? When the history books will be written, when we will explain to our children on the constitutional making of this country, constitution making of this country, they will ask us those pertinent questions. Why is it that the Chief Justice decided 12 to 13 weeks before he goes home to take these actions?
Honorable
and
Shamala,
I think those are questions that the Chief Justice must answer to the people of Kenya.
Let me allow Honorable Boss to come in. Honorable Boss, I have other questions, but hold on, Honorable
when
Shamala.
We are having a debate on having a referendum or going to a referendum, and there's a discussion about
Honorable Shamala,
BBI.
it's my show. We are going to wrap this up if you don't let me continue. Okay, Honorable Boss, I had a question, but first, you probably want to respond to what you've just heard. Go ahead.
Yes, first I don't know if Honorable Shamala is trying to insinuate bad faith on the part of the Chief Justice in doing what the Constitution requires him to do. I think that's being unfair. Justice Maraga may have his faults, but on this one, he is simply following the law. In fact, this advice to the President from Chief Justice Maraga is not, it's not an order of mandamus, it's not a court order, it's not a decision, a judicial decision by Chief Justice Maraga. It's simply a communique of what transpired at the High Court to the President. In fact, he's attaching all the petitions to his communique, and the long explanation is unnecessary. All he had to say is there is a court order. There was a court order last year that required Parliament to enact the 2/3 gender legislation, and Parliament failed to do so, and they were given so many days, and now the law says, and he just quotes Article 261. And remember, I would like Honorable Shamala to explain to me, imagine if we didn't have any law on freedom of the press or system of the courts. Wouldn't there be a crisis in this country? So imagine if Parliament had not enacted the law on the devolved and county governments. So let's leave that. But the other point also I'd like to respond to is, I would like, and as a lawyer and a practical one at that, I know I believe in strict interpretation of the law, but I'm also a practical lawyer. Let us not blame each other and say it was supposed to be the previous government, Parliament, to have enacted the law. Because in any case, the Article 261 says, if this Parliament is dissolved for failure to enact the legislation, then the next Parliament will be required to immediately put in place and follow the law in enacting the legislation. And if that subsequent Parliament fails, then it also shall stand dissolved. And the Constitution puts no limit to the number of parliaments that we can continue dissolving until such time as they follow the law. And remember, the previous Parliament, because the cases were ongoing, and it was as long as from the time when the then Chief Attorney General went to the Supreme Court for an advisory opinion. And the Supreme Court clearly gave them, I think, the 27th of August 2015. And they didn't, and after that, they still didn't act. So there's been a lot of time to put in that. We are just lucky. I don't know, I think many people think the 2/3 gender issue is trivial. But again, I have said to many people that the Article 100, which requires that the issues, laws relating to women, people with disabilities, minorities,
marginalized
communities, and the youth. The law is enacted. In fact, Honorable Shamala is a beneficiary of a special interest seat. I know you said, I acknowledge them. Yes. She's a beneficiary. She's a minority. She's a Pakistani on that ground. She's a minority race in Kenya. Hence the reason why she was nominated. I mean, but that is the way it was described at the time of the nomination. But nevertheless, anyway, she's a minority. And she's benefited from that. So I believe that if we begin to say we don't want, so this is not a women's issue. It is a human rights issue. And if we begin to renege on issues of equality, then it is a slippery slope. Then people with disabilities are in danger. The youth are in danger. The marginalized communities and minorities are in danger,
Honorable
and so
Boss,
as women.
Allow me to interrupt you.
So we must look at it in that context.
Honorable Boss, I want to interrupt you because I need to get a quick reaction from you on this before I allow Honorable Shamala to respond. Now, to move this discussion forward, please tell us this. You've said there shouldn't be a blame game in this whole talk about how we got to this as a country, but many tonight blame Parliament. They say you had all the time in the world to pass the appropriate laws to ensure that the necessary bodies were gender compliant, and you did not. Do you take any responsibility for that tonight, Honorable Shule? Please keep your response brief so that I can get Honorable Shamala in on this. Do you take any responsibility as a member of that Parliament?
No, in fact, I stand vindicated because I have a bill which I put before the House immediately I was elected. So I have a constitutional amendment bill, and it got stuck after the first reading with the Budget Committee, and the Treasury completely said it was unnecessary. And why I'm saying this is a good thing that we've reached where we are is because the reason why the law wasn't wasn't enacted is because a lot of members of parliament thought there were no consequences. They thought it is something that they can pick and choose. And that is why I asked them to liken it to the National Land Commission legislation and the system of the courts.
Okay.
Because they think it's a trivial matter and that it's a women's issue. They don't realize it's an issue of human rights.
Let me allow Honorable Shamala
and the right to equality. And Kenya has ratified the international laws, and our constitution clearly says in Article 2 that any laws that we ratify, international treaties that we ratify, become the law of Kenya and the constitution and part of the constitution of Kenya.
Honorable Boss.
That is why we ended up in ICC, because we signed the Rome Statute. And at that time, the president did not disobey the summons to the ICC, because Kenya was a signatory to the Rome Statute.
Okay, I'm going to interrupt you there because you did also make that same point a bit earlier on in this discussion. Honorable Shamala, I also want to ask you the same question. Do you bear any responsibility for how we found ourselves in this particular situation? You're not happy with the move the Chief Justice made, but many ask, you could have done something in your role as a nominated member of parliament. Did you play your role?
Yes, sorry.
Yes, go ahead.
Everyone plays their part. Honorable Boss Chalet had her bill regarding this particular issue. I have currently 3 bills before Parliament touching on other issues: biosecurity, right to food, and amendments to particular acts. So in my specific area, I have played my part. So I'm not going to say and say that I bear the responsibility for this particular amendments not having yet been passed. And with the issue with regards to Honorable Boss Chalet's bill, I think it was at first reading, and she would be probably best placed to tell us. I think it was earlier this year, and I think it was slotted for second reading. So it's not that there is a bill before the House, and she has done her part on that, and I want to commend her for it. Having said that, I also want to clarify something, that I am not casting aspersions on the CJ's conduct, and neither on his integrity. I am asking pertinent questions, not only on my behalf, but for and on behalf of the people of this nation.
My follow-up question is, as formidable women leaders, do you feel that the leadership or women leaders in parliament actually took up this move to implement, of course, gender rules and operationalize them with the seriousness that it is?
Operationalized it, yes,
that's right.
We
with the seriousness
did, and that
it is.
why
Let me finish. Because when we did see formations like Inua Mama, Embrace, the kind of mobilization that Kenyans saw at that time was unlike what had been seen in the past. And many ask, if that same seriousness was taken with this matter, we wouldn't be here discussing this. Go ahead, Honorable Shamala.
I think that is unfair and an unfair comparison to make, because I am in Parliament and I saw the efforts that were made and the lobbying that went on between members of Parliament. It may not have been highlighted by the press, but KEWOPA, the Kenya Women's Parliamentary Association, also took it very seriously. So I don't think it's a fair statement to say that, you know, there was more effort put in Inua Mama or more effort put in Embrace and less in this particular agenda. Like I said time and time again, and I'm saying it again, it is a societal issue. It is an issue which we need to discuss, and it's a fact. It is a fact that women will stand, and was addressed, a woman will stand against a man, and some incredibly, look, Muranga is a great example where you have women who have been voted on single constituencies. But where else and in how many parts of the country will that happen, where people will vote for a woman as opposed to a man? It will not happen, and that is the reality of the situation as we speak. So I agree that, yes, we must address this issue, but we must address it in a wider, in having this wider conversation, because you, on the other hand, Are we going to say that we will now then increase the number of seats? And will the people of Kenya accept that to ensure that we have more affirmative action seats? Are the people of Kenya going to say yes in order to ensure that we have the 2/3 gender principle, realize that we increase seats? What do you think is going to be the reaction of the people of this country? As it is, they think that Parliament is bloated, that they are overrepresented. Those are the questions that we should ask the people of Kenya, and I think those are the discussions that will revolve around this BBI initiative.
I actually want to get into that right now, Honorable Shamala. And I want to bring in Honorable Boss. We'll give you a chance to respond to what's been said. But also, let me hear this from you. What exactly would it look like if President Uhuru Kenyatta actually dissolved Parliament? And if an election was held, would it be a new parliamentary term of 5 years or a completion of the remainder of the current term? What would that look like, Honorable Boss, in your estimation? Because you've been very clear. Dissolve, that is what the Constitution says.
I'll just answer that in a minute, but before I get there, I know that Honorable Shamala has said that would the people of Kenya want seats to be increased in order to meet this affirmative action legislation. Already the people of Kenya spoke when they voted in the Constitution. Already we spoke when we swore to uphold that Constitution, knowing very well that that clause was in it. And then let us look at the comparisons with other countries where women are elected. You must realize that in countries where the biases and cultural biases exist, like in Kenya, we require the affirmative action programs, which are only a temporary program. In this one, we are asking for it to be last for 10 years. After 10 years, we assume that women will have showcased themselves and will be capable of election. And therefore, we won't need a bloated parliament. If Kenyans understand that this is a stopgap measure in order to take care of issues of inequality, you must realize that even people in the US, for example, the UK, they don't require to have affirmative action at parliament level. Why? Because there is no inequality at the base level. Every child is able to go to school. Every single mother who has children gets food from the state and a home and medical help. So therefore, people are starting from an equal playing field. In Kenya, we are not starting from an equal playing field. So women, we are still talking about shortage, that girls don't go to school because of lack of sanitary towels. That's how low we are in trying to get to the issue of inequality. And because we want to solve those policies and implement them like those countries have, then we need women in positions of decision-making and in positions of leadership so that they can be able to have an opportunity to articulate those challenges that women are facing on the ground and ensure that those policies are implemented and to bring them to an equal level. Okay. Then at that time, we will not require the affirmative action programs. And this is not the first time that Kenya is involved in affirmative action. We had the programs of the girl child. And that has done well because many girls are now going to college.
Okay.
In fact, at the moment, the current discussion we are having is we need to have a program for the boy child. And then remember, we also had the arid and semi-arid lands programs where someone who didn't qualify for university, for the public universities, but was coming from, let's say, Mandera or Turkana, would be allowed to join university with much lower points, grades, because it was known that if they were the top student in their area, then it meant that it was just because of the inequality that didn't allow them to attain the same points as a child who came from Kiambu, for example.
Okay, Honorable Boss, very important information.
It is not new in Kenya.
Very important information you're giving us, but please answer my question. Should the president choose to dissolve parliament, an election happens, what would be the terms of the parliament that would then come into play? And of course, what views should the president take seriously tonight with a lot of information flying around about what he should do?
Article 261 is directed at Parliament and not any other elective post. It's not directed at the presidency. It is not directed at the county governments. So this is directed at Parliament. So Parliament shall stand dissolved, and therefore there shall be a by-election. It's like a by-election. It's not a general election. In a by-election, you only serve for the remainder of the term. Similarly, if a member was recalled, and then there would be a by-election. It wouldn't be that they would get a fresh 5-year term. So this should be seen in the context of a by-election.
Okay, and I want Honorable Shamala to pick up on that. What would be the political consequences should the president to make the move that you say he should not? Bearing in mind, this is a president who has an unhappy... Let me finish.
Okay, sorry.
I'm going to say this is a president who currently has an less than satisfied deputy. He's also dealing with an ambitious ally in the handshake. There's a lot happening on the political front. If he was to make such a move, what would be the possible repercussions?
First of all, when we talk about an election, the law is very clear. It is an election of not only members of parliament, but the president, the governors, the members of the county assemblies, the members of parliament. But this will be left to the courts to argue, and the lawyers who are going to be adequately represent all sides. Having said that, I would want to bring something to your attention. The House of Representatives in the United States, and which has had, in the United States, has had affirmative action policies in place for several years, is only 22% of the House of Representatives are actually women. And the other thing that is very interesting when it comes to gender issues is if you look at the countries that have produced the most women leaders, we will start with Pakistan, where you had Benazir Bhutto, a daughter of Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, Indira Gandhi, the daughter of Jawaharlal Nehru, Begum Zia, the wife of Zia, the former Prime Minister of Bangladesh. These are highly patriarchal societies which produced women leaders. And again, I keep on saying and addressing the issue of yes, Honorable Gladys Boss says it's a stopgap measure that will be done, erased in 10 years. Where is the evidence for this? There is no evidence in this particular country. Since 2010, we have only now managed to reach the 22% representation of women in parliament, which is actually quite commendable. I want to say, to say that it is very commendable. So on that note, I state that I think it would be not, until we have exhausted all avenues within the courts and within parliament, it would not be the right time for the president to dissolve parliament. It will open an entire Pandora's box. This will not be it will not be an election just for members of parliament, but the entire political structure. And maybe that's what it was intended to do.
Honorable Shamala, if this was the first time I was listening to you, you would forgive me for thinking that you are satisfied with the gender composition in public bodies today. Are you? It sounds like you believe all is well out there in the public service, whether in the legislature...
No, absolutely not. But I'm a pragmatist. And I'm a pragmatist, and I will not make statements just to be for political correctness and for a feel-good factor. I am a pragmatist. I am not satisfied at all, but I'm putting out the reality of what the situation is today.
And it's a reality that Honorable Boss believes could be very different. Honorable Boss, your chance to respond. Political consequences that the president would have to deal with. Again, we're looking forward. Possible scenarios. Should the president choose to dissolve parliament? We know the political landscape in Kenya right now. It's very murky, very different from what was there a couple of years back. How would he handle that? Should he choose to move forward and follow Maraga's advisory?
No, I think if I were the president today, I'd be working overnight trying to figure a way of finding a solution. The Speaker Muturi has gone to court seeking an injunction. And he will most likely get it because usually it's a temporary order and it's just for a short time to allow parties to ventilate the issues, and the court might grant it, and should grant it. But during that time, without the president, I would use the opportunity to try and find, like I said, it's not a legal way of doing it, but it's an administrative way. And remember, once you cure the problem, then there will be no need really for the dissolution, because if there is anyone who stands to lose from the dissolution of parliament, he's the head of state. He has a legacy to maintain. He's got 2 years before his term ends. He hasn't finished most of his program. He had the Big Four, which has hardly taken off the ground. He needs to get that started. He has roads that he needs to complete. He has programs that have been established. Recently, I think even in the news today, he was opening up the port and down at the coast. He needs to complete that, because if he dissolves parliament, it's a catch-22 for him. If he dissolves parliament, it means all the executive orders and plans that require to be approved by parliament will be on hold while we go back to elections and campaign. But at the same time, if he decides to ignore the Chief Justice and not dissolve parliament, then he will go down in history as the president who was in gross violation of the Constitution. I know that today he was addressing or planned to address the United Nations General Assembly. Imagine how he'd look in front of his peers at the United Nations. He will go down in history as the president whose country ratified international conventions, and then he just decided to ignore them. So the president is not at a good place, at least in my thinking. I haven't spoken to him, so I don't know, but I can imagine it's difficult for him. So I believe, because I know that he's very keen on his legacy, I believe he'll move very quickly to find a solution. Okay. Right now, I would be expecting that he's sitting with the speakers of both houses, with the Attorney General, and a few party leaders, and trying to figure a way of being able to avoid the dissolution of parliament for his own legacy's sake.
Okay. Honorable Boss, hang on there, because I'm told we do need to take a break, but I'm getting a lot of feedback here. I don't even know where to begin. So John Buddy still wanting to give his view. He says, lawyers have brought confusion by tying provisions under Article 100 to 27 and then linking the same to 261. While on Twitter, I've seen a tweet here from Kimani Ishungwa. And of course, he's saying, the Member of Parliament, Newsnight, you realize Jennifer Shamala is a beneficiary of a nomination slot on affirmative action while Gladys Boss is elected. Ivunjwe Katambe. I don't think I need to translate that. That's what Kimani Ishungwa feels, and those are some of the views here tonight. I'll be reading as much of your feedback as I can on the other side of this break, and we get some final thoughts from our two legislators who also put on legal hats and legal minds. That's what we continue with in just a bit. On the other side of the break, we'll be right back.